Rumors of foreign settlement, like rumors of enemy fleets, flew from port to port, and some of them turned out to be true. The English founded Virginia and Bermuda in 1607. Father Jeronimo de Ore from Peru, who was no pacifist, thought that with 3 galleons and 1,000 men, Spain could wipe out both colonies, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Instead of withdrawing the Presidio from St. Augustine, the Crown doubled the size of the garrison, agreeing to support 300 places and sending reinforcements of 120 men in 1608. This is an answer to the English settlements. In 1609 and 1611, Governor Juan Fernandez de Oliveira sent scouting expeditions to see what the English were doing in the Chesapeake. The Timucuans of San Juan del Puerto at the mouth of the St. Johns rebelled in 1617 under their cacica, whom Governor Juan de Treviño Guillamas captured and hanged, condemning her followers to hard labor on El Morro, the great fort that overlooks Havana Harbor. What I'm trying to lay out for you is how connected St. Augustine is to what's going on in the rest of the Caribbean and in the Atlantic, and how these seaborne enemies are affecting what it does. Elsewhere in the Americas, the era of the high conquest was over, and the Crown had turned to a policy of pacification intended to reduce the military to protecting missions and missionaries instead of making conquests of their own. In Florida, conversion was only one of the 4 agreements in the colonial compact, the others being exclusive trade, military alliance, and vassalage to the Spanish crown, ratified by an exchange of gifts. Chiefs did not agree to be allies until the Spaniards had proven themselves to be powerful, and a demonstration of power was a conquest. Governor Treviño Guillamas made Central Florida safe for Christianity with a gunboat built on one of the Gulf Coast rivers, in which Captain Juan Rodriguez y Cataya ranged the Gulf, attacking the enemies of the Timucuan missions. The Tocobagas scattered to other rivers, taking their canoes with them. The chief of the Calusas sent word that he wanted no more war with Christians. A cluster of shipwrecks in 1622 brought Spanish salvors to Matacum Key. Their trading contacts with the Indians of the Eastern Gulf and the recent doubling of the garrison made it possible to think about expanding into western Timucua and beyond. When the Spanish moved into Appalachia in the 1630s, I think it was not so much for religious reasons as to have a new source of food and labor and to keep the Dutch and the English from trading or settling there. The threat was not imaginary. A Puritan colony on Providence Island off the coast of present Nicaragua, founded in 1630, at the same time as Massachusetts Bay, lasted for 11 years. The rebellion that would eventually bring the United Provinces their independence from Spain did not register in the New World until after the 12 years truce of 1609 to 1621, when the Dutch West India Company was formed. But the Dutch made up for their late entry in 1628 when the corsair Piet Hein captured the Silver Fleet in the Cuban harbor of Matanzas. St. Augustine was one of the presidios whose subsidies and supplies were seized, 2 years' worth of them, because the ship that was bringing them was making up for another loss. While it was not easy to develop the economy in a land renowned for war, Floridanos did what they could. To trade with the Indians, they needed iron tools. Governor Diego de Rebolledo melted down an anchor, some mortars, and a few old gun barrels to make the implements that Indians of the South Coast wanted in exchange for their ambergris. Soldiers traded their muskets and even their clothes. In the 1620s, Governor Juan de Salinas says that he managed to introduce cattle. Governor Benito Ruiz de Salazar Vallecilla planted a wheat farm on the border between Appalachia and Timucua and imported millstones and a miller, although he died before the miller could begin working. A regular trade in agricultural products developed between the port of San Marcos, which is below present Tallahassee, and Havana, where the silver fleets rendezvoused and were provisioned. The friars invested their profits in the adorning of mission churches and the underwriting of travel expenses. But the crown was letting its end down. There were 10 years between 1624 and 1645 when the money for Indian gifts was either reduced or not released at all. Between 1637 and 43, the situado was not paid in full, and in 1638, the king sequestered it entirely. The cause was the financial burden of the 30 Years' War, compounded in 1640 by revolts in Catalonia and Portugal. But to the Indians, Spain was reneging on its promises and voiding the compact. In the incomplete conversion of Appalachia, the non-Christian chiefs expressed their dissatisfaction in 1648 by killing 3 friars and the deputy governor and his family. The colonial economy received another setback in 1650 when yellow fever came to St. Augustine from San Juan de Ulua by way of Havana, where it had wiped out 1/3 of the population. And this is not Indian population, this is everybody. This was the putrid fever, they called it, to which Spaniards had little resistance, and many Floridanos also died. Yellow fever was followed by smallpox, which decimated the colony's slaves and the indigenous population. A mission list made in 1655 showed only 38 missions active and only 26,000 baptized Indians. Oliver Cromwell's Western design, which followed his attack on Catholic Ireland, was meant to bring the fear of God to the Catholic Caribbean. But the English were unused to tropical diseases, and most of them died. Failing to take Santo Domingo, which was their object, the Penn Venables fleet descended on Jamaica in 1655 and found the Spanish settlements evacuated. An English Jamaica was a more serious threat than an English Virginia or Bermuda, because that island in the heart of the Caribbean could offer a haven to privateers. In 1656, Governor Rebolledo called on the chiefs of Timucua and Guali to reinforce St. Augustine against the attack that he expected from Jamaica any day. And he told them to bring corn enough to ration themselves. Affronted by being treated like commoners, the chiefs around the Suwannee River rose in revolt. After 150 years of contact with European measles, smallpox, and plague, and African malaria and yellow fever, they did not any longer have the numbers to mount a serious threat. But during the, quote, Great Rebellion, they burned missions, destroyed fields, wandered from place to place in search of food, or left for the north. When peace was restored, the governor resettled the survivors at intervals along the Transpeninsular Road to provision the council houses that served as inns and to operate the ferries. But Timucua was left almost deserted of population. As the governor had feared, Jamaican pirates did infest the seaways. One of them, Robert Searles, sacked St. Augustine in 1668, killing people in the streets and carrying off everyone who struck him as non-white. Searles did not destroy the town, which to St. Augustinians meant that he planned to come back and occupy it. In response, the Council of the Indies raised the garrison strength by another 93 soldiers and ordered the treasury in Mexico City to release the funds to build a stone fort. In 1670, Charles II of Restoration England challenged Spain by encouraging Barbadians to plant a colony on the Atlantic coast halfway between Virginia and Florida, and that is Carolina. One of the Menendez clan, accountant Juan Menendez Marquez II, went up to destroy the little settlement of Charlestown, but a storm drove his small fleet out to sea, and before he could return, peace was declared between England and Spain. Charleston was there to stay, and St. Augustine was on the defensive. Charleston thought it was on the defensive too. That's the way things go. The long reign of Charles the Bewitched, the last pitiful Spanish Habsburg king, was a time of despair and decline in Spain, but not in Florida, where his reign coincided with the building of the Castillo. Hundreds of Indians were summoned from the provinces to work on the building, in addition to the 300 who came regularly to grow corn for the soldiers. Wages were inflated, the supply network was strained, and prices rose. The people of Florida were given a rare chance to show their aptitude for business. Governor Manuel de Sendoya speculated with the building fund and fixed a monopoly on corn. The Menendez Marquez brothers, with connections at the Treasury, had a monopoly on beef. Several families were able to buy slaves. Governor Pablo de Ita Salazar conveyed land titles and granted lands, many of them to his own children, which is why he refused to leave Florida when his term was over, as he was supposed to do. Indian chiefs leased their fields. Even the soldiers made money, moonlighting at their secondary trades. Dismayingly, the Timucuan population continued to fall. A census of the provinces in 1675 showed only 11,000 Indians subject to the king. 4/5 of those were in Appalachia, 200 miles by land from St. Augustine. The deputy governor of Appalachia traveled to Madrid and obtained an increased export quota for Florida products. He proposed Appalachia as an outpost for explorations and settlement on the Gulf. And soon there was a new fort in the port of San Marcos. Depopulated Central Florida became an exporter of ranch products, especially the large ranch of La Chua, with the Suwannee as its recognized port. Florida was now worth raiding, not only for its artillery and the silver in its coffer, but for its cattle. And Caribbean buccaneers put it on their itineraries. In summer, no part of the peninsula was safe. St. Augustine occasionally had news of the pirates' plans from a Dutch merchant, Philip Frederick of New York, who could get his small sloop into the harbor and brought them guns on occasion and supplies, whatever they needed, despite the fact that he wasn't supposed to be there. Thanks to his warnings and to the ammunition he supplied on credit, the town was prepared for Sanche de Gramont when he landed on Anastasia Island in 1683, and was even able to capture one of the pirates' galleots. When Gramont returned a few years later, Spanish privateers pursued him north, stopping along their way to wipe out the Scots settlement of Stewartstown below Charleston. Between 1667 and 1697, Spain was at war with France most of the time, as was the rest of Europe, England included. Between 1688 and 97, England and Spain were even allies, although on a maritime marchland, a peace against local interests was not easy to keep. People in St. Augustine believed that Charleston harbored pirates, and vice versa. Harassed beyond endurance, the Gwali Christians retreated island by island nearer to the Spanish capital. More dangerous than the pirates were the backcountry gun runners who supplied Carolina's allies with firearms in exchange for deerskins and Indian slaves. Work continued on the Castillo in St. Augustine over a 25-year period as funds were available in reaction to the level of threat. The last stone of the Castillo de San Marcos was laid in 1695, but completing it had not been easy. The Situado for 1690, for instance, did not reach St. Augustine until 1695. While waiting to work on the Castillo, the laborers burned lime and quarried coquina for other construction, including some government buildings, private homes, and a seawall that took 10 years to build and cost 3/4 as much as the Castillo itself.